It is late. The house is quiet. The street is quiet. You are in that half-awake place where the world has gone soft at the edges, and you are not quite ready to call it morning, but you cannot quite call it night either. And then you hear it, an owl, calling, from somewhere not far away, from a tree behind your house, or from the wood line beyond your fence, or from somewhere closer than that, somewhere a part of you cannot quite locate, even though you are listening with your whole body now. Most people, when they hear an owl at night, pull the covers up and tell themselves it is nothing. The neighborhood, the trees, the way old houses settle. But you did not pull the covers up. You lay there, you listened, you waited to hear it again. If you have heard an owl outside your window at night, and you could not stop thinking about it the next morning, there is a reason. And it is older than this house, and older than your yard, and older than the country we live in. A woman named Rose, from a small farm town in eastern Iowa, wrote to me last November. Her grandmother had passed away in late October in the same farmhouse where she had been born 91 years before. The night after the funeral, Rose was sleeping in her grandmother's old bedroom for the first time. At just past 3 a.m, a great horned owl began to call from the oak tree outside the window. Slowly, deliberately, for almost an hour. Rose wrote, I did not feel afraid. I felt told. Tonight, we are going to talk about what owls mean, not as biology, as messengers, the way human beings have understood them for as long as we have lived alongside them. Welcome back to Backyard Wild Mind. If you are new here, subscribe before you go, because what we are about to talk about is something almost no nature channel will say plainly, and I think you deserve to hear it said plainly. Across the wisdom traditions of nearly every continent on Earth, across the indigenous peoples of North America, across Celtic Europe, across the ancient Greeks, across the cultures of West Africa and East Asia, the owl has been recognized as one of the most significant messengers a human being can encounter. Not a frightening one, a meaningful one. Today, we are going to walk through what it means when an owl calls from your yard at night, what the traditions say, what the call may be telling you about this particular season of your life, what it may be saying about your home, the land you live on, and the people you love. Stay until the end. The last section is the one that has lived with me the longest, and the one I think the people who need to hear it tonight will recognize before I even finish saying it. The first thing to understand is this. The owl did not call from your yard by accident. Owls do not vocalize randomly the way some smaller birds do. An owl calls when it has something to say, to mark a territory, to find a mate, to mark the boundaries of the world that, in the dark hours, belongs to it. And the owl that called from your yard chose, out of every yard in your neighborhood, out of every tree on your block, your tree, your fence, your window, the space directly above where you were sleeping. Across many indigenous traditions of North America, including teachings honored among the Lakota, the Hopi, the Cherokee, and many others, an owl that comes to a home is understood as something deliberate. The owl is not lost. The owl is not confused. The owl has come because something in that house, or in the people who live there, or in the season they are passing through, called for the owl to come. In Celtic folk tradition across Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, the owl was known as a keeper of thresholds. The threshold between day and night. The threshold between this world and the next. The threshold between one season of a life and the season that follows it. When an owl appeared near a home, the people of those traditions did not assume something bad was coming. They assumed a passage was being marked. A doorway between one chapter and another was open. And the owl, being a keeper of thresholds, had come to acknowledge it. If an owl has called from your yard recently, especially repeatedly, take a moment with that. Something in your life right now may be passing through a threshold you have not fully named yet. A relationship that is changing. A grief you are still inside of. A version of yourself that is finishing. A new one trying to begin. The owl is not telling you what to do about it. The owl is simply witnessing it. And in the traditions of nearly every culture that has ever lived close to owls, being witnessed by one is treated as a moment worth honoring. Here is the part that surprises people. And here is the part where I want to give you the small piece of science I think matters before we go further. Cornell Lab of Ornithology, through decades of research on owl biology, has documented something about owls that almost no other backyard creature can do. An owl's hearing is so precise that it can locate a mouse moving under a foot of snow in complete darkness purely by sound. Some owl species, including the barn owl, have hearing accurate to within 1 degree of directional precision, a level of acuity that human technology has only recently been able to match. The 2 ear openings on most owl species are positioned asymmetrically, one slightly higher than the other. This allows the owl to triangulate the exact location of the smallest sound in 3 dimensions, in pitch darkness. Owls hear, in a very real and measured sense, what no other creature near you can hear. Now here is where the science meets something older. For thousands of years, in cultures across the world, the owl has been understood as a creature that perceives what humans cannot. In ancient Greek tradition, the owl was the companion of Athena, the goddess of wisdom. And the meaning of that companionship was not that the owl was clever in the human sense, but that the owl saw what was hidden. In West African Yoruba tradition, the owl was understood as a being that walks between the visible and the invisible world. In Japanese tradition, the owl was a protector against suffering, capable of hearing trouble before it arrived. These traditions did not have neuroscience. They did not know about asymmetrical ear placement or 1 degree acoustic precision. What they had was thousands of years of watching owls. And what they noticed was that owls knew things. The wind shifting before a storm, the rabbit hidden in the brush, the visitor approaching the village an hour before the dogs began to bark. The owl in your yard is, in this very real sense, aware of things you are not aware of. It is hearing what you cannot hear. It is sensing what you cannot sense. And when it calls, directly above your home in the dark hours, the traditions of every continent agree on at least this much. It is calling about something. The question of what is yours to sit with. Take notice of when the owl called, not just the season, the hour. Most people do not realize this, but in the wisdom traditions of many cultures, the specific hour of an owl's visit is part of the message. The night was understood for thousands of years, not as one undifferentiated block of darkness, but as a series of specific spiritual hours, each one with its own meaning, each one ruled by something different. In Christian contemplative tradition, dating back to the desert monastics of the 3rd and 4th centuries, the hour just before midnight was called the hour of vigil, the hour when the watchful kept watch with God. The hour just after midnight was the hour of stillness. The hour around 3 in the morning, sometimes called the witching hour in folk tradition, sometimes called the hour of breath in Eastern contemplative practice, was considered the hour when the veil between this world and the next was thinnest. In Chinese traditional thought, the hours between 11 at night and 3 in the morning are governed by the meridians of the liver and the gallbladder, the organs associated in that tradition with grief, with deep emotion, with the unconscious work of healing. So when you remember the hour the owl called, you are remembering something the traditions consider meaningful, not random, not coincidence. A specific hour of the night with its own spiritual character, chosen by a creature that does not call randomly. If the owl called in the deep middle of the night, around 3 in the morning, in the hour of the thinnest veil, many traditions would say you have been visited at the most sacred hour the night offers. If the call came just before dawn, in the blue hour before sunrise, you were called at the hour of returning, when what has been lost in the night begins to find its way back into the light. Each hour carries its own weight, and the owl who chose your hour was not, in the wisdom of the old teachings, arriving by accident. The fourth thing to consider is the season. When in the year did the owl come? Across many traditional teachings, particularly among the indigenous peoples of North America and across European folk wisdom, the season in which an owl visits a home is read as a mirror to the season the visited person is passing through internally. An owl in autumn, when the world is letting go of its leaves, is often understood as a witness to release, to grief, to the necessary work of letting something go. An owl in deep winter, when the land is silent and the trees are stripped to their bones, is read as a presence in the quiet, a companion for the kind of inner work that happens only in stillness. An owl in early spring, when the ice is breaking and the first green is rising, is understood as a herald of becoming, a marker that something inside you is preparing to emerge. A reader named Catherine, from a small town in northern Vermont, wrote to me this past March. Her marriage of 26 years had ended in October. She had spent the winter, in her words, in pieces. She wrote that on the first night of February, in the coldest week of the year, a barred owl had begun calling from the maple tree outside her bedroom window. It came back 4 nights in a row. On the 5th night, she said, she got out of bed and stood at the window in her robe in the dark and listened to the owl call from the tree. And she felt something in her chest that she had not felt in months. She felt accompanied. Catherine wrote, I do not know what it was, but I know I needed it. And it came. Catherine was not imagining the timing. The barred owl is a real bird with real territorial behavior, and a maple tree is a real perch. But she was also not wrong that the visit meant something. In the season she was in, the bare branch season of her own life, an owl appeared. 4 nights in a row, from the same tree. If an owl has come to your yard in a particular season, and if you can name, even quietly to yourself, what season of your own life you are passing through right now, there is a chance the two are speaking to each other in a language older than English. And you do not have to do anything about it. You only have to notice. The noticing is itself the honoring. In the traditions of those who have listened to owls for centuries, the species of owl matters. I am going to say something that most owl content avoids saying clearly. I think it matters which owl called from your yard, not just for biological reasons, for meaning. Across indigenous teachings from many North American nations, across Celtic and Anglo-Saxon folk tradition, across the wisdom literatures of Japan and China, the different owls have been understood to carry different messages, not as a system of certainty, as a language, the way different words carry different weight. The great horned owl, the largest and most powerful, the one with the deep, resonant, almost too low to be heard call, has been understood in many traditions as a presence of ancient authority, of weight, of a message that should not be ignored. When the great horned owl calls from your yard, you have been visited by what many traditions consider the elder, the one who has been here longest, the one whose voice has the most gravity. The barred owl, the one whose call sounds like a human voice asking, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" has been understood across folk tradition as a more conversational presence. The owl that speaks. The owl that addresses you almost as if it has known you. When a barred owl calls from your yard, many traditions read it as a moment of being spoken to. Not warned, spoken to. The eastern screech owl, the small one, the one whose tremulous whinny sounds almost like crying, is the owl of intimacy in many traditional readings, the owl that comes close, the owl that does not need to be loud, because what it is come to say is meant only for the person who can hear it. When a screech owl has called from your yard, you have been visited by the owl of the quiet message, the one delivered softly, because it was meant for you alone. The barn owl, the pale, heart-faced owl that haunts old buildings and quiet farms, has been understood across many European and North American traditions as a guardian, a protector of homes, a keeper of the unseen edges of a property. If a barn owl has come to your yard, something is being watched over. None of this is meant to be a fortune-telling system. I do not believe in those, and I would not offer one if I did. What I am offering is what the old traditions believed about each kind of owl, so that if you heard a particular call last night, you can sit with the kind of message the traditions believed that particular owl carried. And what you do with it is, as always, yours. The sixth sign is the one that almost everyone who has been visited by an owl eventually notices. The owl came back, not just once, twice, 3 times, 4 nights in a row, on the same week of the year, the following year, from the same tree, at nearly the same hour. When this happens, you have left the realm of the casual encounter. You have entered the realm of relationship. Across many indigenous teachings of North America, and I want to be careful here because these teachings belong to specific peoples and traditions and are not mine to reduce, an animal that returns to you repeatedly is understood as something many traditions call a visiting spirit, or a watcher, or in some traditions, a guide. The Cherokee, the Lakota, the Ojibwe, and many other nations have variations of this understanding, each with its own language, its own protocols, and its own depth. What the traditions agree on, broadly, is this: an animal that returns is no longer passing through. An animal that returns has chosen you. In many Celtic and Anglo-Saxon folk traditions, the same understanding applies. A wild creature that comes back to your home year after year is understood as part of the household, not in the domestic sense, but in the deeper sense, a presence that has incorporated itself into your life, a spirit of the place, a watcher who has chosen, for reasons of its own, to stay close. If an owl has been returning to your yard across seasons, across years, across the slow turning of your own life, you have not been keeping track of a coincidence. You have been keeping track of a relationship. And the owl, in whatever way owls understand such things, has been keeping track of you too. I saved this last one for the end because it is the one that lives in the letters I receive in a way no other sign does. If you have lost someone, a parent, a spouse, a child, a friend who knew you the way no one else has known you since, there is a chance you have already heard the owl I am about to describe. It came in the hours before the death, or on the night after, or on the first anniversary, or on a difficult morning in a season of grief when you needed something to come. I want to talk about this carefully because it is sacred ground, and almost no one is going to talk about it with you honestly. Across nearly every wisdom tradition on earth, the owl has been recognized as one of the creatures most associated with the passage between this life and what comes after. Not as a harbinger of doom, the old traditions almost never read the owl that way. They read it as a companion, a witness, a creature whose ancient role in the cosmology of many peoples was to accompany souls in transition. In Mexican folk tradition, the owl is sometimes called el ave de la muerte, not because it causes death, but because it accompanies death. It walks the road with those who are walking it. In Egyptian tradition, the owl was associated with the journey of the soul into the next world. In Welsh and Scottish folk tradition, the owl was sometimes called the watcher at the gate, the one who waited at the threshold, neither rushing the soul nor abandoning it, simply being present for the crossing. A reader named Margaret, from a small town outside Asheville, North Carolina, wrote to me last spring. Her mother had been dying for several months. On the night her mother passed, just before 3 a.m, the family was gathered around her bed. The hospice nurse had stepped out of the room. Margaret was holding her mother's hand, and from the tall pine tree directly outside the bedroom window, a great horned owl began to call. It called 5 times, slowly, deeply. Her mother took her last breath between the 4th call and the 5th. Margaret wrote, "I have not told anyone outside my family. I am telling you because I think you would understand. I do not know what the owl was, but I know it was not a coincidence, and I know that something in me was helped by it. I want to tell you what I told Margaret, and what I want to tell you if you have heard an owl in a moment like hers. I cannot tell you with certainty what the owl was. No honest person can. The scientific framework can tell us that great horned owls call territorially in the early hours of the morning, and that pine trees are good roosting trees, and that all of this is biologically explicable. What the scientific framework cannot tell us is why the calling and the breath aligned, why the timing was what it was, why the moment felt the way it felt. The old traditions had an answer for that. Not a scientific answer, a meaningful one. They believed the owl was doing what owls have always done at the threshold, witnessing the crossing, accompanying the soul, marking with its ancient call that something sacred was passing through. You do not have to believe any of that to feel that something happened. But the traditions of nearly every continent agree on at least this much. When an owl calls in the hour of a passing, you have not been alone with it. The owl was there. The world, in its own old way, was present. Owls have been called in the hours of human passings for as long as there have been humans and owls together. They were calling in the villages of the Cherokee 1,000 years ago. They were calling in the cottages of Wales 800 years before that. They will be calling long after we are gone, on the trees outside the windows of people who have not yet been born, in moments that have not yet happened, for souls that have not yet begun their crossings. If you have heard an owl in a moment that mattered, at a passing, at a turning, at a hard hour you were not sure you could survive, hold it. The owl came. The moment was real. The witness was real. Whatever you call the thing in this world that in the deepest hours still reaches for us, the owl in your yard on that night was part of it. Before I let you go, I want to say something honestly. Backyard Wild Mind is a small channel. It is one person sitting at a desk, reading the letters people send in, reading the old traditions, and trying to put into words what I think the wild lives around our homes have always been trying to say to us. If this video reached you tonight, the most helpful thing you can do is hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell. Not for me. For the next person lying awake at 3 in the morning, hearing an owl outside their window, searching for words about what they just heard. The algorithm only finds them this video if enough of you tell it that the work matters. If you can leave a comment, even one sentence, it is what keeps small channels like this one alive in a world full of louder ones. Before you go, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know that I read every comment that comes in. Has an owl ever called from your yard at a moment that you have never quite forgotten? What kind of owl was it? What hour of the night? What were you carrying in your life at the time? Did you tell anyone afterward? And if you did they understand? I read every story, and I carry them with me. The ones from the hours of a passing, the ones from the seasons of letting go, the ones from people who simply woke up at 3 in the morning to an owl they could not name and have been thinking about it ever since. Tell me yours. And if this video reached someone you love, someone who has heard an owl recently and not known what to make of it, share it with them. Sometimes the right words at the right hour are exactly the thing. Thank you for being here at Backyard Wild Mind. This is a channel about the small wild lives that share our backyards with us. The birds, the butterflies, the things we hear at night, the creatures that have decided, for reasons of its own, to live close to us, and to come close when we need them to. If that is the kind of channel you want to spend time with, I would love to have you stay. I will see you in the next one.